we thought it'd be good to share. The city of Des Moines has submitted. We have submitted a grant application for Safe Streets for All for the second round for an implementation grant. So I'd like to share, what the grant was for and kind of how we went about, preparing and submitting that grant, just so folks have an idea. When the MPO team finishes the Transportation Safety Action Plan, that would make all the folks in the MPO eligible for implementation grants. So if folks are looking to submit for that fourth and fifth round or both, we thought this might be a good idea to show what we went through for this grant program. So we called our grant application right sizing DSM. Full disclosure, that kind of was swiped a little bit. I think there was another right sizing Louisville. So, but that's the theme of the projects in our grant application, is to right size our streets. Many may be aware of the Safe Streets for Roads for All program came about through the infrastructure law that was passed in 2021, and that allocated $5 billion over a period of 5 years. And like I said, the MPO was successful in securing money from the first year. We have submitted here for the second year. We just submitted this July. The main focus is roadway safety, eliminating roadway fatalities and serious injuries. The program provides for two types of grants: planning and demonstration, which is the one that the MPO was successful, and then the one that we have submitted for is an implementation grant. One thing to note is to submit for an implementation grant, you must have an eligible action plan in place before applying. So that's a requirement there, and they have a check sheet to make sure that happens as well. And this list here just shows kind of what FHWA deems as a successful grant application. Again, back to that focus of safety, preventing deaths and serious injuries, covering a larger geographic area, and equity is one of the main components of this grant program, as well. And then there's a few other categories in there: innovation. They want to hear about public engagement, and how does it align with some of the department's transportation's goals as well. So as I mentioned, the city of Des Moines did finish a transportation safety action plan in June. It took us a little over a year to once we got the consultant on board to complete that plan with the amount of public engagement. We have set a goal of 2040 for eliminating serious injuries and deaths. And so that plan was just, again, adopted in June, and right before we submitted our grant program in July. We had actually started the action plan before we knew about the program. Conveniently, and I'll be sarcastic there, but they decided the second round of grants, the NOFO, came out pretty early in March. So we kind of had to scramble and really wrap up our action plan. We thought we were going to have more till the fall to submit the grant when we found out about it, but it ended up being a little earlier for the second round. So just make note, the NOFO this year came out in March and was due or end of March and was due in July. So our action plan, through our action plan, we developed what's known as a high injury network. And so that was the main when I talk about what I like about the plan is a focus. How do we reduce those fatalities and severe injuries in our city? And so to start with this, our consultant team used data and created what's known as the high injury network. So this is essentially, where do we want to focus our energy if we really want to knock down those numbers of severe injuries and fatal crashes? So you can see on the right, on the map on the right, the dark bold lines are what we've deemed as the high injury network. And no surprise, there's a lot of major corridors there. That's where the traffic volumes are. And so a lot of major corridors show up on that. Our MPO has in GIS data the environmental justice areas, and so they of course share that data, and we took our high injury network and overlaid that with the environmental justice areas. As we mentioned, there's to have an equity focus for what we want to do here. We then took and looked at that a little closer. Okay, well, what projects would we implement to start this process to implement Des Moines Vision Zero? And so we've come up with 5 projects. They're highlighted in red here, and I'll list them here in a second here. But I guess Douglas Avenue, you can see in the upper left, which is also US 6. Euclid Avenue, also US 6, which goes right through Highland Park. Then we have the one-way pairs of Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway and 19th Street that go north and south, just north of I-235. We have Forest Avenue going right through Drake University's campus. And then we have the intersection of Southeast 14th and Maury as well on there. And here's the list of these. Unfortunately, some of these have higher rankings, very, very high rankings in the state for crash history. That's not something we want. So just like Iowa State will move up in the rankings after this weekend, we hope that these move down in the rankings. So that's our goal here is to hit some of these locations that are some of the higher crash locations in the city. So kind of talking about these projects, Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway, 19th Street. Again, they're one-way pairs. They're 3 lanes in each direction. And so 10,000 vehicles a day in each direction. So 20,000 between the two of them. They have higher crash rates. And then these images that you see here, we included in our application. We wanted to the FHWA gave a lot of webinars on this program, and we wanted to make it very clear what is the problem and how are we solving it. So that was the point of this bubble on the right that kind of summarizes everything, and then the table that you see in the middle of the screen. What are the issues, right? We've got rear end crashes, broadside, side swipes, and so the whole goal is to reduce the number of travel lanes, reducing the speeds to reduce those things. Speeding was an issue as well identified here. So reducing those travel names or number of travel lanes, reducing the speed limits, and then safe transportation options, right? Filling sidewalk gaps. There's sidewalk gaps, and when there are sidewalks, they're right along the edge of the roadway, so it's not a comfortable environment to walk on. Whoops. So here's kind of a quick graphic that shows, again, 3 lanes, one direction. We'd be taking it down to 2 lanes, which allows us to add more parkway, allowed a shared use path on one side. And so just this project alone is about $4 million. So if we use the typical 80% rule of thumb, we are asking for 3.2 in Safe Streets for All. Again, we have one big ask for multiple projects is what we're going to end up with here. So we're also going to resurface the roadway as part of this too, to reconfigure and adjust the lanes and the curbs. Douglas Avenue, US 6. This is from Merle Hay to Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway. We had actually done some study and planning work on this, and we've even done a pilot project for it, working with the DOT. And so this roadway, the focus here again, issues rear end broadside. Okay, well, it was a 4-lane undivided roadway, and so again, we've done a pilot project to restripe it as 3 lanes. To address those, and then this project would actually move the curbs, which would shorten pedestrian crossing distances, allow us to improve the sidewalks. The sidewalks are not good at all along this corridor. Some of them right along the road in poor condition. Some of them barely even 4 feet wide as that, and so it would allow us to improve some of those things. Oops. So here's that graphic. Again, going from 4 lanes to 3. Shared use trail on one side as well. And this image on the right was taken by Matt Miller from the Iowa DOT. He also is very good at operating a drone, and so that's what he used, obviously, to take this photo. This was the pilot project that reduced it down to 3 lanes. It has been successful, and so we'd like to use this project to make those improvements more more permanent. So in this case, we do already have $4.5 million that we've secured in STBG funding. So this grant would look to bring us up to that 80% with the 3.5 for Safe Streets for All. Euclid Avenue, which has been a pretty popular one with the media and the residents in the area. This road is about a little over 18,000 vehicles a day. So it's getting on that threshold. Typical 3-lane roads handle about 20,000 vehicles a day. So it's getting up there. So we modeled it, and then we're asked to do a pilot project. And so that pilot project just used pavement markings as well as some temporary concrete islands to bring that roadway from 5 lanes. In some cases, it's 4 lanes, and then there's a section right through the Highland Park commercial area where that's 5 down to 3. It has performed, to be honest, better than anticipated. The pilot project, we thought there would be a little more congestion than what it's seeing, but it's performed better than anticipated. And so again, how do we address the issues that we're seeing there? Going down to 3 lanes, narrowing the pedestrian crossing distances with the curbs and doing curb extensions. And so here's kind of the graphic that shows, again, it was a 5-lane road. It's currently striped for 3 as part of the pilot project. And then we use the curb extensions to make that more permanent, to shadow the parking and shorten the pedestrian crossing distances. And there you can see those little temporary concrete islands. Again, not ideal. It was a pilot project. We put them there because if we didn't put them there, we felt vehicles would use the parking lanes as travel lanes anyway. So we'd rather have the vehicles, if they were, use those islands to shadow the parking. We have taken some flack for people hitting the islands, and I usually reply a little more politely than this, but if you're one of the vehicles out of every 250,000 trips a day that hits those, maybe you might need to look in the mirror. So again, they're not hit as often as people any more than any other median we have in town. But obviously, when it's something new, we tend to get a lot of feedback on it. So Forest Avenue, right through the heart of Drake University. Again, this is a 4-lane undivided road that goes right through that Drake campus. There's only not even 7,000 vehicles a day. So definitely does not need to be 4 lanes. But there is some common themes of crashes we're seeing, as well as, again, we have a lot of pedestrians obviously in this area. And so the plan there, again, going from 4 lanes, right sizing it to essentially 3 lanes, but through Drake's campus in front of the NAP Center, there's a lot of pedestrian crossings. So we'd be adding actually a median. While that graphic shows more in the red, we've talked to Drake, and the thought was maybe to use more of that Drake blue for their school colors for the median. And there's kind of the graphic. You can see Drake Stadium, the NAP Center, and then on the far right of the screen over by 25th Street, where the new high school, Des Moines Public Schools, Drake Stadium is going to be. So you can see, again, going down to that 3-lane roadway, but through Drake's campus, you'll see mostly a median to try and tighten things up, make it tighter for the traffic, as well as make those pedestrian crossings much shorter and easier to cross. And then we'd also use the other space to accommodate a buffered bike lane through here as well. So there's kind of the graphics. Again, $3.6 million project. We'd be asking for 80%. Unfortunately, this Southeast 14th Street in Maury has the #1 ranking out of corridors, out of 389 corridors for IDOT potential for crash reductions. So it's not a great ranking at all. This is an area that has very heavy truck traffic. Not only does it have 30,000 plus vehicles a day, it has extremely high truck traffic, lots of turning movements here. And so this has a pretty extensive crash history. So we're looking at a concept to separate some of the conflict points. And there's a couple reasons for this, and I'll show here in a graphic. And then also do some access management. So some of these properties along here have lots of different driveway access points. So we'd like to consolidate those, reduce those, and it basically consolidate as much as possible to reduce the number of conflicts. We're even also restricting some of the turning movements on Railroad Avenue from a craft standpoint, and complaints from the residents. People would cut through the neighborhood and use Railroad Avenue to kind of dart out onto US 69 as well. So again, why is this concept developed? Well, one, separating those conflict points, and then also providing a positive offset. This is probably the one thing that I do annoy my wife with when we're driving around all over the place. It's a pet peeve of mine. I despise having a negative offset intersection for left turns, and so this graphic kind of shows that, right? When we talk negative offset, and you're sitting there making a left turn, and it's difficult for you to see around the opposing left turning traffic. So we've been working through the city as we do our intersection projects to make these positive offset intersections. So you'll notice this for example, right by the state fairgrounds at 30th Street, where we made it more of a positive offset so folks can see around the opposing traffic. And in this case, we'd actually be separating those movements and turning movements by eliminating the through movement to the west leg of Maury. And then what this also does is instead of having traffic kind of cut through the residential streets and come up to Maury, and everyone comes up to one point at the Maury and US 69 intersection, we'd actually create kind of a little curved roadway that takes folks down to Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway, another arterial road. And so that way it kind of separates the movements as well. So this also includes improving the sidewalks along the corridor. And then we'd actually add a shared use path that connects the Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway down to the Carl Voss Trail. This is all in coordination with the DOT. The DOT has a bridge project that they're replacing that bridge over the Des Moines River, and so they would add the trail as well. So about a $6 million effort for that whole stretch of corridor there. So overall, our ask is $17 million for a $27 million project. So the Safe Streets for All portion is $17 million. So you can kind of see the breakdown there in the map of the projects on the right. These do line up well with the Safe Streets for All. The Safe Streets for All is kind of that typical 5-year time frame for performance time frame. And so if we're successful, these projects some of them would start in 2025. Others would start in 2027 and end more like in 2029, but all still within that 5-year time frame to complete the projects. And so why did we choose these? This is always a challenge anytime there's money. Electeds and folks in the public are like, oh, no, there's money, let's go get it. And I'm a believer in finding funding for projects, not finding projects for funding, because I'm a believer that we should know what we're doing and have planned out those projects. And there are, as we all know, time frames of when we have to spend the money. So these projects, they're identified in our Vision Zero plan. They were on the high injury network. We had our non-federal match programmed. We had concepts developed, so they're ready. We've already started we'd already done the planning on the projects. And then they fit the criteria for Safe Streets for All. That safety aspect, equity, engagement, they fit the criteria. So that's why they were chosen. And the Safe Streets for All grant, it's a little different. When I've done raised grants in the past, that's like a big submittal. Here, they actually, instead of using grants.gov, we actually use Valid Eval is the software or the site that you submit the grant on, and you actually submit multiple documents. You don't submit like one submittal. So they have it all broken out, and you can kind of see the checklist on the right there. But they have a number of forms that you actually have to submit and fill out, using. So you basically use their forms, and then the narrative is actually a 12-page narrative. So where Ray's was I think a 30-page overall submittal. This was, you have a narrative that's 12 pages, and then you submit a bunch of their documents as well, the budget information. There's a self-certification eligibility check sheet. you kind of see there in the middle, that's to kind of be that they're very clear on, do you have a safety action plan, in place, and does it do these things, and they, that they require of a safety action plan to submit for these. So again, this was we submitted this in July. Very commend Jennifer Dokovich, our principal traffic engineer, was the lead on this and prepared one of the better grant applications I've seen, and so she did a great job in that. So we're hoping we'll find out here in October, is what we're told, on whether or not we're successful in receiving that. But again, I kind of flew through this, but I wanted to kind of give everyone a touch of what it looks like to submit, because with the MPO starting that action plan planning, and say that's complete next year, late next year, that would line folks up for the 4th and 5th submittals for that Safe Streets for All grant program. So with that, I'll stop. And is there any questions on this? Okay.
Steve, this is Gunnar. I just want to chime in and first thank you very much for doing this presentation for us. And also I'd like to say to everybody online that this is something that we're going to try doing more regularly going forward. The thought process here is to solicit presentations from our member governments, and particularly things of regional significance or that would have relevance. This one, of course, has relevance because everyone on the call will have eligibility for this grant program after our action plan is complete. So what I'd like to ask is you to start thinking about projects or initiatives that you would like to hear about, or things happening in your jurisdiction or jurisdictions if you're working collaboratively, that would be of interest to the larger group. Please reach out to me with any ideas you have about things that you might present or you'd like to hear from others. In our follow-up email, I will be soliciting ideas as well. But if I don't get ideas from you, I'm going to start reaching out to you and asking, like I did for Steve. So anyway, thank you again, Steve, and look forward to hearing ideas from all of you.
Thanks, Gunnar. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. So that concludes item 4. So we'll go to item 5. Let me stop sharing here. Sorry if I can see that stop share. Okay. There we go. All right. So item 5 is a report and a vote on federal fiscal year 2024-2027 Transportation Improvement Program amendments. Zach, are you available to talk on this one, please?
Yes, thank you. We have 3 requested amendments to the federal fiscal year 24 through 27 TIP. The first one is from the city of Des Moines. Back when we were developing the draft TIP, the city had requested that we split the Southeast Connector into 2 different phases. That was related to a grant application that ultimately ended up being unsuccessful. So their request now is to combine those 2 projects back into one project, and put the full 58 million total cost back onto that one project. STBG, they have I think a little over $11 million in STBG funding for that first phase. And now will just be applied to the full projects, which will go from Southeast 30th Street all the way out to US 65. The second project we have is from the city of Johnston. This is for their Merle Hay Road Traffic Signal Improvements project. This project was awarded CMAQ or ICAP funding in an amount of a little over $620,000. The request on this is to move it back into federal fiscal year 2024. It was in 23. They thought they were going to be able to get it completed, but they've had some delays and they're having to push it back a little bit. So they're requesting that we move this project into 24 for them. The final project is from the city of Polk City for their North 3rd Street reconstruction project. They have received STBG funding in the amount of a little over $1.1 million from the MPO for this project. The requested change here is to update the project description. The current description is just a little bit vague, and they've been requested to make it a little bit more descriptive. And so you can see there in the change column there, what they're requesting is that we'll have the change to, in the city of Polk City, on North 3rd Street from 300 feet south of Northside Drive to East Vista Lake Avenue. And so we'll go in and make that change if it's approved and then update the map as well. So those are the 3 projects that are before you for amendments. I'd be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, they're up for a vote.
Are there any questions on these amendments for Zach? Hearing none, can I get a motion and a second, please, to approve these amendments?
It's Rudy, I'll move.
Thanks, Rick.
Second.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, we got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, is anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, we'll consider that approved. Thank you, Zach.
Thank
That
you.
takes us to item 6, which is a report and a vote on federal fiscal year 25 Iowa Clean Air Attainment Program applications. Zach, can you speak to this one as well?
Yes. So last month we discussed the pre-applications that have been submitted. We received 3 applications in total on the screen there before you, 1 from Ankeny, 1 from Polk County, and 1 from West Des Moines. Those communities are currently working on their ICAP applications. These all match up with our long-range plan. So we're requesting approval this month. Following approval, we'll submit the resolutions onto the project sponsors so that they can include those in their applications to the Iowa DOT, which are due by October 1st. Happy to take any questions on these, but we did discuss them last month, and now they're just before you for your approval this month.
Thank you. Any questions for Zach? Hey, hearing that, can we get a motion and a second, please, to run these to the policy committee? Approve the recommendation, I'm sorry.
Montoya, I'll make a motion. It's Rudy, I'll second.
All right, thanks, Luis. Thanks, Rudy. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, is anyone opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item 7. This is listed as a report and optional vote for the MPO 2020 Urban Area Boundary Update. Andrew, are you able to talk to this one, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So just as a reminder, following each decennial census, federal law requires that states, there's a cooperation between the state and the MPO to update the urban area boundaries. So the U.S. Census Bureau defines urban areas as any densely settled areas containing 2,000 or more housing units or 5,000 or more people. Everywhere else is considered rural. Prior to 2020, the Census Bureau relied on population only, and then they defined urban as 2,500 or more people. So the urban area boundary defines eligibility for a couple of things, most notably who requests federal functional classification changes, as well as it impacts the highway performance monitoring system. So a link was sent out prior to the meeting with the proposed changes to the 2020 urban area boundary. Here, a map on the screen before you shows those proposed changes. The area, the dotted line in green is the proposed 2020 UAB. The area in red shows what the urban area boundary was in 2010. And the requirement here is that the 2020 urban area boundary must include the urban area, which is the blue hashed line. There, as you can see, the recommendation is not to change too much regarding the UAB. I will note, though, between 2010 and 2020, we did have Polk City become their own urban area. So we had to split the Des Moines urban area into 2 different parts, one for Polk City, and then the rest for the Des Moines urban area. The planning area boundary on there, and we'll discuss that here in a second, will also be updated here fairly soon. Next slide. So in addition to the update process, there will also be an update to the Federal Functional Classification System, or FFC, for the roads within the Des Moines Metro. So in the fall, systems planning at the Iowa DOT will begin identifying UAB-related federal functional classification changes. They'll review that with the group to incorporate that any changes. The MPO will also be identifying additional federal functional classification changes that may not be associated with a UAB update. This will follow the current policy that we have. We will work with local jurisdictions to identify those potential changes and request those changes to the DOT. So once the UAB for Des Moines and the Polk City urban areas are finalized, the MPO will also then begin updating our planning area boundary. That will begin by requesting copies of each community's comprehensive plan and future land use map. So the reason for that is because our planning area has to do a couple of things. One, at a minimum, it's required to include the census designated urban area. In our case, we have to include the Des Moines urban area at a minimum. But then the planning area also is supposed to incorporate contiguous areas that are expected to urbanize over the next 20 years. In particular, the planning area boundary also determines funding for both of our STBG and TAP programs. Funding levels are based on population, so typically we don't see major changes in those funding streams as we incorporate additional area out in the rural county. The planning area boundary also determines project funding eligibility for those jurisdictions that are members of both the MPO and SRPTA. Just the way that MPOs and RPAs work is you won't see cities that have overlapping memberships, but specifically Dallas County, Polk County, Warren County are members of both. So if you have a project in one of those areas, depending on which side of the line that project falls on, would determine which pots of funding that project would be eligible to apply for. So staff recommends approval of the proposed changes. If you have any additional updates, please let us know, and we'll be sure to incorporate that as we move forward for the urban area boundary. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Are there any questions for Andrew? Andrew, it says, and I apologize, it says optional vote. Just to clarify, what's the optional?
Typically, optional votes are things that haven't come before the board yet for a vote. So it's optional. If we were to have this next month, it'd be just a regular vote.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is there any, I guess, or reason to do it today from a timing standpoint, or?
Yeah, we were. The process for this was supposed to begin earlier in the summer. Obviously, there's been some changes at District 1 with the Andy Lunan leaving the DOT. So now we're kind of moving forward with getting this approved, hopefully by the end of this month for the DOT to get everything incorporated on their side of things.
Okay. And then just to be clear, this does not, again, where there is some changes with the red, I mean, particularly Carlisle is the one that's changed there. This does not impact their STBG eligibility or anything. I'm trying to think of is there any negatives on this for?
Just to request federal functional classification changes within the urban area boundary, it would be the MPO on behalf of the member jurisdiction. Outside of that, it would just be them in consultation with the MPO requesting that to the DOT.
Okay. So no impacts on their STBG though?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. Is there a motion and a second to approve the update to the MPO urban area boundary?
Moved, Huesman.
Okay. Thank you, Chelsea.
Second, Rudy.
Okay, thank you, Rudy. All right. Is there any discussion on this motion? All right. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 8, report on upcoming events. Z, are you able to take that one, please?
Yep, thank you. Yep, good morning, everyone. We've compiled some upcoming events for you on the slides here. I have 3 of note that I want to mention. The first is the Iowa DOT's Traffic Incident Management Conference at the end of September in Ames. And then 2 events in October, the Iowa Trail Summit on October 6th in Marshalltown, and the APA Upper Midwest Annual Conference, October 11th to 13th in Cedar Falls. If you have any questions on these events, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you, Z. Any questions for Z? Z, are these links emailed in a follow-up or is it,
Yeah, I believe so.
looks like these are links, right? That you have
Yep.
on the screen, but okay.
Yes, they'll be included in the follow-up.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. All right, that brings us to item 9, other non-action items of interest to the committee. Do we have any?
Steve, I have one brief one. Last month, we updated you on the rollout of a new agenda distribution system. This is the same system we'll be using to distribute newsletters and such. This is the first month we are using it. I hope that you all got your agendas without issue, but I just wanted to open up for conversation if you have any feedback on the new system or if you had any issues with it. From staff perspective, it's been going very smoothly so far, but I just wanted to touch base with you all, and if there's any issues, let me know.
Okay. Any questions for Gunnar on that? Okay. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Gunnar. I think it was a kind of a typical simple subscription type thing that you can, from what I remember signing up, so pretty simple. So. Okay, that brings us to item number 10. Item 10 is our next meeting date, October 5th, 2023, 9:30 in the morning. So, all right. That brings us to item 11. We'll consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you, and I'll see you all in the fall. Thank you so much.